Ah, interesting.
Okay, so how do we figure out, for those people that don't know what those like 10 ego states that are basically hanging around them most of their life, how do we like teach leaders like to uncover what some of these, I want to call them characters, because
Yeah, sure. That's exactly what they're. So there's a couple ways. When I'm working with clients, everybody gets a deck of the interactive cards, whichever way that goes. And I love to flip through these. There's about 85 of them. They're only images. There's no words on them, and everybody sees something different in those pictures. So I like to have my clients flip through those and pick out characters, like you said, which is a great word for it, what they relate to. If you don't have a deck of cards, it's all about just sitting down with pen to paper and writing out, okay, well, I have a manager part, and I have a mom part, and I have an organized part, and I have a sporty part, and we all have a rebel. People hate to hear that, but we all have a rebel. If we didn't, we'd still be sitting on our parents' laps, right? It's that rebel that jumps down and runs and kind of looks back like, can I go? And if the parent says, yeah, go ahead, I'll be right here, then that rebel's developed in a good way, a more healthy way. It's that part of us that picks up the food from the high chair and goes, and the parent says no, and we throw it anyway. That's the rebel starting to develop. We all have a rebel. The rebel serves us really well in certain times, right? We all have parts that worry. We have vulnerable parts. We have pleasing parts because we want to connect and help other people. But sometimes if our pleasing part gets carried away, then we find ourselves doing the 30-second bake sale for the PTA when we don't want to do it. So that's when these parts that are healthy for us get a little out of control. Like I said, I love Capricorn, but man, if she gets to take over 100% of the time, I am not a happy person and I am not fun to be around. So writing it down is one of the best ways, writing those out.
And so once we write them down, or we have like people like, probably get a deck of these cards and start flipping through them and figure out like what are your main characters, which cards you are really identify with, so that then we can, just like you said, you don't want to be Capricorn all the time.
Nope.
You want to, and you could sort of alluded to this like in the beginning, we want to be able to tap into what's the character that we need for this moment here, for this task to like inspire, like as a speaker, like you and I know that we have to tap into and step into that speaker character. Who's that person that gets on stage, that inspires audiences, that works with clients? I mean, these are all these different characters that we probably like step into like constantly throughout the day.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because when I do this as a workshop, because I go into companies and organizations and I do this as a keynote, and I got my PowerPoint, because Capricorn, when I'm speaking, it's interesting because you get Kathy speaker. That's the PhD me, right? That's the me that has all the knowledge. So this little librarian kind of type person is flipping through my brain and giving me the knowledge that I need, keeping me on time, making sure the slides move, all that sort of thing. Now, if you only get that part of me, that's pretty damn boring, right? Those are those talks you heard where it's blah, 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 PowerPoint, blah, 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 PowerPoint. That's not fun. No one wants to hear that. So you also get the entertaining part of me, which makes it funny, so that it's engaging and it's funny, and I've got silly PowerPoint, and so you get my entertainer too. But if you only get my entertainer, then it's stand-up comedy and not a workshop, and you're not actually learning anything. So you get kind of this mix of characters. And then let's face it, anytime you get in front of anybody to do anything, there's that vulnerable part of you, right? There's that kind of scared little kid of, I hope they like me, and what if this gets screwed up? And now you can't only have that, because I think we've also seen that person speaking where it's and I don't and it becomes this awkward, like, and you're like, oh my god,
that's why that person needs to sit with Lorianne. That's all that is. That person just needs to go through Lorianne's course and learn how to be a better public speaker, right, Lorianne?
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you for that. So what I'm hearing you say, what were you going to say?
I said a little Lorianne plug.
Thank you. So Kathy, what I'm hearing you say, like when you know like your task, like, and we're just talking about speaking here, like you're going to be the speaker. So you have to pull these different characters, different ego states, like we're all doing this together.
Yep.
Like for this next, like my 60-minute keynote, maybe you've got like 3 or 4 characters that are actually like working with you, and they all like take their turn during your keynote.
Yep. Absolutely. And I do it without thinking about it. Like I don't stop and go, okay, I'm going to be funny now. Let me bring out my entertainment. That would be weird. People would carry me off the stage. But we switch through so quickly. I mean, how often have we had this conversation with ourselves, right? Of, I had a really rough day. I think I'd like ice cream for dinner. Well, then your judge comes out, right, and says, well, you can't have ice cream for dinner. That's inappropriate, and you're putting on too much weight. And then your manager comes out and goes, look, we talked about this. You're trying to lose weight for summer. And then your shameful kid comes out and goes, oh, I'm a piece of shit. I can't believe I want ice cream for dinner. And then your happy pig comes out. And the next thing you know, you're having Haagen-Dazs as your meal for the night, right? We switch through things that fast. And when I give that example, people go, were you in my house last night? Because we've all had, we see a commercial, we're like, oh, I want Cheetos for dinner. And we go through these different roles in our head, right? So this is the next step after sort of identifying them. So I like to tell people to pick the top 3 to 5 states that they have. And maybe it's just simply, okay, I have a manager, I have a mom, I have an analyzer, I have a pleaser. Maybe it's as simple as that.
I was about to ask real quick, Kathy, is how do you identify those? Like, how do you identify, if you don't know, if you don't have some crafty deck of cards or you're trying to understand this, how do you go about, does this go through a day? Do you journal? Do you write down? Like, do you go through a week? Like, how do you identify these ego states?
Yeah, I like plopping down with a piece of paper and pen, and I actually do this in person during the workshop, is I have everybody write down their top 3 states. And there's it's sort of the roles you play every day is the easiest to do that. So when you're at work, what do? Well, it's kind of your manager state, right? We all have a manager state who puts our pants on in the morning and gets us to things on time and buys the groceries. And, we all have that part of ourselves. And we all have a caregiver part. And maybe that's a bigger part for you than somebody else. We all have a pleasing part. Sometimes we have a jester part that is a big one for you. So I have people write their top 3 down. And then there's a choice. You can either just write down what they do, manager, jester, mom, or you can name them. And you have to name them by what they want to be called, not by what you think they want to be called. I'll give you an example. I had a client come to my office and she said, Kathy, I don't know what my problem is. I can't get off the couch. It's been 3 weeks of wine, ice cream, Netflix. I just can't get off the couch. And I said, okay, well, what part of you is on the couch? And she said, lazy ass. And I said, does that part want to be called lazy ass? Or is your judgy part calling it lazy ass? And she thinks for a second and she goes, yeah, that's my judgy part calling it that. And I said, okay, because I wouldn't want to be called lazy ass. If it
What's
likes
your name? Can you tell us? I'm curious.
Can tell you. I said, well, close your eyes and just tap into that part and think about it. And she called it 14-year-old. Because she had just lost her husband after a long bout with cancer. She was in horrible grief and she didn't want to adult because the last time she adulted, her husband died. And so she was this 14-year-old sitting on the couch, eating the ice cream, drinking the wine, watching the Netflix. And 1 or 2 nights of that is okay. We have to give all of our states their due. But when it becomes so overwhelming that you can't get out of this state, and we know people who are angry all the time, everything is some giant dramatic thing, right?
It's Lorianne. She's always in a bad mood.
Oh, yeah. She looks very
constantly.
cranky.
She's mean. Lorianne's mean. I'm joking. Nobody would ever believe that. She's always smiling and in a good mood and everything's wonderful. And I'm like,
well, she's got a sassy side, though. She's got a sassy side.
Donnie agrees. Definitely, he said.
Yeah. So write down what it wants to be called. Meanie. If you know, write it down what it wants to be called if you know, or just do it by kind of the category it falls into. And then write its positive traits. And I'm going to use negative in quotes because there's not really a good word for it, because they're not negative. That's when it gets out of control. So Capricorn, organized, successful, natural leader, great communicator. When Capricorn gets out of control, judgy, type A, bossy, not very fun, workaholic, cold, emotionless, which is great when you have to go do a tax audit, not great when you're on a date with your husband. So, when does that character get out of control? And then to get a little psychologically on us, what role is it serving in your life? What does Capricorn do for you? And is there a fear? I'm using Capricorn as an example. Is there a fear that if she doesn't do that job, something's going to happen?